Now, there is present in the world at the moment, or at least I like to think so, an impulse which I have named the Archaic Revival. It's what happens is that whenever a society really gets in trouble, and you can use this in your own life, when you really get in trouble, what you should do is say, what did I believe in the last sane moment that I experienced? And then go back to that moment and act from it, even if you no longer believe it. Now, in the Renaissance, this happened. The scholastic universe dissolved. New classes, new forms of wealth, new systems of navigation, new scientific tools made it impossible to maintain the fiction of the medieval cosmology. And there was a sense that the world was dissolving. Good alchemical word, dissolving. And in that moment, the movers and shakers of that civilization reached backwards in time to the last sane moment they had ever known, and they discovered that it was classical Greece. And they invented classicism in the 15th and 16th century. The texts which had lain in monasteries in Syria and Asia Minor, forgotten and untranslated for centuries, were brought to the Florentine Council by people like Gemistus Pletho and others, and translated, and classicism was born. Its laws, its philosophy, its aesthetics, and we are the inheritors of that tradition. But it is now once again exhausted, and our cultural crisis is much greater. It is global, it is total, it involves every man, woman, and child on this planet. Every bug, bird, and tree is caught up in the cultural crisis that we have engendered. Our ideas are exhausted, the ideas that we inherit out of Christianity and its half-brother science, or its bastard child science. So what I'm suggesting is that an archaic revival needs to take place, and it seems to be well in hand in the form of the revival of goddess worship and shamanism and partnership, and men and women are divine beings. The great world, the whole of the cosmos, is reflected in the mystery of man, meaning men and women. It's reflected in the mystery of the human mind-body interface. Well, in other contexts, in alchemical symbolism, we will meet again and again symbolic expression of the coincidentia oppositorum. It may be in the form of a hermaphrodite. It may be in the form of the union of Sol and Luna. It may be in the form of the union of Mercury with lead or with sulfur. In other words, alchemical thinking is thinking that is always antithetical, always holds the possibility of, by a mere shift of perspective, its opposite premise will gain power and come into focus. An archaic revival needs to take place, and it seems to be well in hand in the form of the revival of goddess worship. Oh, someone put this here. This is a new novel that's just been published by Lindsay Clark called The Chemical Wedding. And I see last week it was number 10 on the New York Times bestseller list, which is astonishing for such an obscure subject. It's a retelling of a famous incident in alchemy in the 19th century when a woman named Mary Alice Atwood, who had a very, very close relationship to her father, Dr. South, and the two of them worked together, she on a text and he on a long poem. And to make a long story short, eventually they decided to destroy both the poem and the book, feeling that they had said too much and had given the secret away. At least that's one version. So this is a fictionalized retelling of that incident, intercut with a modern cast of characters very clearly modeled on the poet Robert Graves. Let's see. Yes. Oh, here it is. I did bring it. And some accounts say that Edward Kelly had no ears, which indicates that he had had his ears removed for being a charlatan and a mountebank. This was a common punishment in the provinces of England. So Edward Kelly was a very dubious character, I think. For one strong piece of evidence that he was a shady character was John Dee was married to a much younger woman named Anne Dee, who by all accounts was quite a beauty. And after gaining Dee's confidence as a scryer, the person who could look into the showstone and lay out these scenarios that the angels and the entities coming and going in the showstone were putting forth, Kelly revealed to Dee that the angels had instructed him to hit the hay with Anne. And this was a great crisis in their relationship. However, according to Dee's diary, and so it was done, we read. So, hanky-panky didn't begin with the Golden Dawn, believe me. Then someone asked about Tantra and the contrast between the imaginative, internalized invocation of the anima or the animus, depending on your own sexuality, and that contrasted with something which actually happens between two people. We didn't talk that much about the concept of the chemical wedding, or the alchemical marriage is another way of putting it. But this is the Western resonance to the Eastern idea of Tantra. And it is the idea that sexual energy, being the rawest and most accessible energy to the organism, can be channeled into a higher spirituality. Well, it's entirely so. The problem is, of all paths, this is probably fraught with the greatest difficulty, because sexuality is such a debased coinage in the modern world. In other words, you have to make your way with great care and great purity of intent into this. In Eastern Tantra that is actually practiced in this physical manner, there is usually the admonition is that you should have no attachment to your tantrika, that the relationship should be entirely given over to the technical details of this union. And of course it has to do with the forestalling of orgasm and the raising of energy within the organism. In the chemical marriage, in the alchemical marriage, due honor is given to the importance and uniqueness of the other person. In other words, it isn't the idea of the temple prostitute who serves as the vessel for this process, but there's actually an effort to keep individual identities and individual dignity, in some sense, together. And this is, the higher up the mountain you go, the steeper it becomes. And when you begin to scale the heights of alchemical or tantric sexuality, the fall back into the nigredo can be shocking indeed. So that's just an admonition. It's not designed to scare you off. It's just to say that in an age as sexually obsessed as our own, you have to, as the I Ching says, inquire of the oracle once again if you have purity of intent. And all esoteric traditions, East and West, talk about the creation of this body of light. And we will not in this weekend talk very much about alchemy, non-Western alchemy, Taoist alchemy, and Vedic alchemy. But in those systems too, the notion is about the creation of this vehicle of light. This is one metaphor for the externalization of the soul. The philosopher's stone is another. This poem is called A Description of the Stone. Though Daphne fly from Phoebus bright, yet shall they both be one. And if you understand this right, you have our hidden stone. For Daphne, she is fair and white, but volatile is she. Phoebus, a fixed god of might, and red as blood is he. Daphne is a water nymph, and hath of moisture store, which Phoebus doth confine and heat, and dries her very shore. They being dried into one, of crystal flood must drink, till they be brought to a white stone, which washed with virgin's milk, so long until they flow as wax, and no fume you can see. Then have you all you need to ask. Praise God and thankful be. This is a recipe for the production of the philosopher's stone. And the author, I'm sure, felt that he'd spoken as clearly as he dare speak. And yet, making something of this is no easy task. This is from the Theatrium Chemicum Britannicum.